The silence before the storm. The city of Silverbrook had always admired Ayesha. People knew her as a graceful woman with a warm smile, impeccable manners, and an almost mysterious calmness. She never sought attention, never argued in public, and never displayed the wealth that surrounded her life. To outsiders, she looked like the perfect wife. Her husband, Daniel Rahman, was considered a successful businessman. He often appeared in newspapers beside influential politicians and wealthy investors. Friends admired him. Employees respected him. Society envied his luxurious lifestyle. Everyone believed Daniel had built his empire with intelligence and hard work. No one knew the truth. The empire wasn't his. It had been standing long before Daniel entered Ayesha's life. But Ayesha had never cared who received the credit. She believed marriage meant partnership, trust, and sacrifice. When Daniel dreamed of expanding his businesses, she quietly supported him. She signed documents without asking questions. She introduced him to investors. She convinced family members to trust him. She believed every success they celebrated belonged to both of them. For 7 years, she loved him without hesitation. She never imagined that every sacrifice she made was slowly becoming the weapon that would one day be used against her. One rainy evening, Ayesha returned home earlier than expected. Daniel had told her he was attending an important board meeting. She wasn't suspicious. She simply wanted to surprise him with dinner after hearing that he had been working late for several weeks. The mansion felt strangely quiet. Most of the staff had already left for the evening. As she walked upstairs, she noticed laughter coming from Daniel's private office. She smiled. Maybe the meeting had ended early. She gently approached the door. Before knocking, she heard a woman's voice. "I can't wait until we're finally married." Ayesha froze. Her smile disappeared instantly. Daniel laughed. "You won't have to wait much longer." Ayesha felt her heartbeat quicken. Maybe she misunderstood. Maybe it was business. Maybe. Then Daniel spoke again. "The divorce isn't necessary." The woman sounded confused. "What do you mean?" Daniel chuckled. "As long as Ayesha stays legally married to me, everything remains under my control until the inheritance is transferred." Silence. Then the woman asked quietly, "And after that?" Daniel answered with terrifying calmness. "Then she becomes unnecessary." Every word struck Ayesha like shattered glass. She couldn't breathe. Her hands trembled. She wanted to run into the room and demand an explanation. Instead, she stayed completely silent, because for the first time in 7 years, she realized she didn't know the man she had married. That night, Daniel returned to their bedroom acting exactly as he always did. He kissed her forehead, asked about her day, complimented the dinner, smiled naturally. He looked like the perfect husband. Ayesha smiled back. She laughed when he joked. She wished him good night. Not once did she reveal what she had heard. Daniel believed his secret was safe. That was his first mistake. After Daniel fell asleep, Ayesha quietly left the bedroom. She entered his study. For years she had respected his privacy. Tonight, she unlocked the drawer he always kept hidden. Inside she found another phone, a second passport, several property agreements, private photographs, luxury hotel receipts, then a black folder. Her hands shook as she opened it. Inside were contracts, financial reports, and handwritten notes. One document caught her attention immediately. Marriage agreement, confidential. The bride's name wasn't hers. It belonged to another woman. Sophia Bennett. Wedding date, only 12 days away. Ayesha stared at the paper in disbelief. Her husband wasn't planning an affair. He was planning another marriage. And according to the documents, the wedding wasn't about love. It was about acquiring a family inheritance worth billions. Daniel intended to deceive everyone, including the woman he planned to marry, including Ayesha, and perhaps even himself, because hidden beneath every carefully arranged document, there was one secret that Daniel had never discovered, a secret powerful enough to destroy everything he believed he owned. Ayesha slowly closed the folder. A single tear rolled down her face, but then she wiped it away. Her sadness disappeared. Something colder replaced it. Patience, determination, and a plan. Daniel thought she was weak because she stayed silent. He had no idea. Her silence had only just begun. The game behind the smile. The next morning, the mansion looked exactly as it always had. Sunlight streamed through the tall windows. The housekeepers moved quietly through the halls. Daniel sat at the breakfast table, reading the financial pages of the newspaper as if nothing had happened. Across from him, Ayesha poured coffee into his cup with the same gentle smile she had worn for years. "You're quiet today," Daniel said without looking up. "I didn't sleep well," she replied calmly. "You've been working too hard." He reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "You should take a vacation." Ayesha looked into his eyes. The concern sounded genuine. If she hadn't heard his conversation the previous night, she might have believed every word. Instead, she simply smiled. Maybe you're right. Daniel smiled back, completely convinced that she suspected nothing. The moment Daniel left for work, Ayesha locked herself inside the library. She spread every document she had copied across the large oak table. There were contracts, emails, property deeds, bank statements, secret investment records. The more she read, the clearer the picture became. Daniel had never loved Sophia Bennett. Sophia was the only granddaughter of billionaire industrialist Edward Bennett, a man whose health had rapidly declined over the past year. According to public reports, Edward planned to leave nearly his entire fortune to Sophia, provided she married before his death. Daniel had somehow entered her life, pretending to be a wealthy, successful businessman. Sophia believed every lie. She had no idea he was already married. She had no idea she was simply another piece in his carefully planned scheme. Ayesha leaned back in her chair. So this is your masterpiece, she whispered. She wasn't the only victim. Sophia was about to lose everything as well. For a brief moment, Ayesha considered warning her immediately. But something stopped her. If she acted too soon, Daniel would destroy the evidence. No. He needed to believe his plan was succeeding. Only then would he make the mistakes that exposed him completely. Later that afternoon, Ayesha visited a quiet cafe across town. An elderly man was already waiting at a corner table. His silver hair was neatly combed. His navy suit looked old-fashioned but elegant. The staff greeted him with unusual respect. His name was Mr. Victor Harrison. To most people, he was simply a retired lawyer. To Ayesha, he was the only person her late father had trusted completely. Victor stood as soon as she arrived. I was hoping I would never receive your call, he said softly. Ayesha sat down. I wish I hadn't needed to make it. He studied her face carefully. You know. She nodded. I know everything. Victor sighed deeply. I warned your father this day might come. Ayesha frowned. What do you mean? Instead of answering, Victor reached into his leather briefcase and removed a sealed envelope. It was yellow with age. Across the front were handwritten words. To be opened only if Ayesha's marriage is threatened by betrayal. Ayesha's heart skipped a beat. My father wrote this? Victor nodded. The night before he died. Her hands trembled as she broke the seal. Inside was a short letter. My dearest Ayesha, if you are reading this, then the man you trusted has betrayed you. I prayed this letter would never be needed. There are truths I kept hidden because I wanted you to live a life built on love, not wealth. But if love fails, truth must take its place. Trust Victor Harrison. Everything I own, everything the world believes belongs to others, has always belonged to you. And only you. The time has come for you to reclaim it. Ayesha lowered the letter slowly. Her eyes filled with tears. I don't understand. Victor closed his briefcase. You will. For nearly 2 hours, Victor explained the truth. Years ago, Ayesha's father had secretly transferred ownership of his companies into a private family trust. Legally, no husband, business partner, or investor could ever control it. Not without Ayesha's direct authorization. To protect her from kidnappers, greedy relatives, and corporate rivals, the ownership had been hidden behind layers of legal structures. Even Daniel never discovered it. He believed he owned the companies because he signed the papers. In reality, he had only been managing them. Every major decision still required one hidden signature. Ayesha's signature. Every profit, every property, every international investment, every luxury mansion, every company Daniel proudly called his own, already belonged to her. And it always had. Daniel had spent years believing he was the king. Without realizing, he had never been more than an employee. Ayesha sat in stunned silence. So, if I withdraw my authority, Victor smiled. Everything disappears. And Daniel, he loses every company by sunset. Ayesha looked out the cafe window. Cars passed. People laughed. Life carried on as usual. Yet in that single moment, her entire world had changed. She wasn't the helpless wife Daniel thought she was. She held the power to destroy everything he had built. But power alone wasn't enough. Justice required perfect timing. As she prepared to leave, Victor spoke one final sentence. The wedding is in 10 days. Ayesha nodded. I know. Victor's eyes narrowed. What are you planning? For the first time in days, Ayesha smiled. Not with sadness, not with pain, but with quiet confidence. I'm going to attend the wedding. Victor looked surprised. As a guest. Ayesha picked up her handbag. Yes. She walked toward the exit before adding one final sentence. And when the vows begin, I'll let Daniel destroy himself. The woman they underestimated. The following 10 days passed in complete silence. At least, that was what Daniel believed. Every morning, Ayesha woke before sunrise, prepared breakfast, wished her husband a productive day, and watched him leave with the confidence of a man who thought he controlled every move on the board. He never noticed the subtle changes. He never questioned why Ayesha had stopped asking about his late-night meetings. He never wondered why she no longer searched for affection in his eyes. To him, her silence meant surrender. In reality, it meant strategy. The moment Daniel drove away each morning, Ayesha's real work began. She met with Victor Harrison almost every day. Inside his law office, stacks of confidential files covered the conference table. Corporate ownership records, international trust agreements, bank authorizations, inheritance documents. Every page revealed another secret Daniel had never known. Victor carefully explained each document. "Your father believed wealth attracts the wrong people," he said one afternoon. "He wanted you to marry for love, not because of your family's fortune. That's why almost every legal document was designed to hide your identity." Ayesha looked down at one particular file. It contained the original ownership certificates of Ramon Global Holdings, a multinational corporation worth billions. The registered owner was not Daniel. It wasn't even her late father. The documents clearly named only one legal beneficiary, Ayesha Ramon. She stared at the papers for several seconds. "So all these years?" Victor nodded. Daniel believed he was signing executive approvals. He was. But every executive decision required one invisible approval hidden inside the trust. "My approval." "Exactly." Ayesha slowly closed the file. Daniel had spent years calling himself a self-made billionaire. The truth was almost cruel. He had never owned a single company. Meanwhile, Daniel was living his dream. He spent every evening with Sophia Bennett. Sophia believed she had finally found the perfect man. He was charming, confident, successful. He knew exactly what to say. He remembered birthdays. He sent flowers. He spoke kindly to waiters. He donated money to charity whenever cameras were nearby. To the world, Daniel looked like the perfect gentleman. Only Ayesha had seen the monster hiding beneath the smile. One evening, Daniel arrived home unusually cheerful. He carried a velvet jewelry box. "I have a surprise," he announced. Ayesha looked up from the book she was reading. "For me." Daniel smiled warmly. "Who else?" Inside the box rested an elegant diamond necklace. "It belonged to my mother," Daniel lied. "I want you to have it." Ayesha admired the necklace without touching it. It was beautiful. But she already knew the receipt had been issued only 3 days earlier. Purchased using company funds. The same company Daniel believed he owned. She gently closed the box. "It's beautiful. You don't like it?" "I do." "Then why aren't you wearing it?" Ayesha smiled softly. "I'll save it for a special occasion." Daniel seemed pleased. "Good. Very soon. We'll both have something to celebrate." His words carried a hidden meaning. He thought he was talking about the fortune he would soon inherit. Ayesha knew something he didn't. The celebration would belong to someone else. The next day, Ayesha received an unexpected phone call. It was from an unknown number. "Mrs. Ramon?" "Yes. My name is Emily." There was nervousness in the young woman's voice. "I work as Mr. Daniel Ramon's personal assistant." Ayesha remained silent. I don't know if I should be calling you." "What happened?" Emily hesitated. "I can't stay quiet anymore." An hour later, they met inside a quiet public park. Emily looked terrified. She kept checking over her shoulder before speaking. "I've worked for Mr. Ramon for 3 years." Ayesha listened carefully. "I thought he was a good man." Emily swallowed hard. "But I've seen things." "What kind of things?" Emily opened her handbag and removed a small flash drive. "This contains copies of emails." She placed it on the bench. "Financial transfers, fake contracts, private messages, and recordings." Ayesha looked at the drive. "Why are you giving this to me?" Emily's eyes filled with tears. "Because I heard him talking. He said that after marrying Sophia Bennett, his first wife would become a problem." Ayesha's heartbeat slowed. "What exactly did he say?" Emily whispered. "He said, once the inheritance is secure, Ayesha won't be around to ask any questions." Silence filled the park. Emily looked down at her shaking hands. "I don't know what he meant, but it frightened me. So I copied everything before deleting the office backups." Ayesha carefully picked up the flash drive. "This could ruin him." Emily nodded. "I know." That evening, Victor examined every file stored on the drive. His expression grew more serious with each passing minute. Finally, he removed his glasses. "This is bigger than I imagined." Ayesha frowned. "What is it?" Victor turned the laptop toward her. One document was highlighted in red. It was a life insurance policy. The insured person, Ayesha Ramon. The beneficiary, Daniel Ramon. Insurance value, $100 million. Ayesha felt a chill run down her spine. Victor quietly closed the laptop. He wasn't just planning another marriage. He was preparing for your death. The room fell silent. For several long moments, neither of them spoke. Then Ayesha stood up. Her face remained calm, but something inside her had changed forever. The woman who had once hoped to save her marriage no longer existed. In her place stood someone stronger, someone impossible to deceive, someone who had finally stopped mourning the life she had lost. Victor looked at her carefully. "What are you thinking?" Ayesha walked toward the window and watched the city lights shimmer in the darkness. "The wedding is only a few days away." "Yes, they believe they're about to win." Victor nodded. "And?" Ayesha turned toward him with a quiet smile. "Let them celebrate. For now. Because on the day of the wedding, they won't be watching me. They'll be watching the bride. And that," she paused, "is exactly when everything will fall apart." The wedding invitation. 3 days remained before the wedding. The entire city seemed captivated by the upcoming ceremony. Business magazines praised Daniel Ramon as one of the country's most influential entrepreneurs. Social media overflowed with photographs of him and Sophia Bennett attending charity galas, fashion events, and exclusive dinners. Every headline described them as the perfect couple. No one questioned how a married man could be publicly preparing for another wedding. Daniel had carefully built a web of lies. According to the story he had told everyone, he and Ayesha had been living separately for months and were quietly finalizing an amicable divorce. A few forged documents and a handful of powerful connections were enough to silence most questions. The public accepted the illusion. Only 3 people knew the truth: Ayesha, Victor Harrison, and Daniel himself. That afternoon, a courier arrived at the mansion carrying a beautifully wrapped envelope. It was addressed to Mrs. Ayesha Rahman. Daniel happened to be home. He picked up the envelope before a servant could deliver it. His expression froze for just a fraction of a second when he recognized the golden seal. It was the official emblem of the Bennett family. He quickly forced a smile. "You received an invitation." Ayesha looked surprised. "An invitation?" "Yes." He handed her the envelope. "I suppose Sophia wanted to be respectful." Ayesha slowly opened it. Inside was a luxurious wedding invitation. "Mr. Daniel Rahman and Miss Sophia Bennett request the honor of your presence at their wedding ceremony." There was no mention of Daniel already having a wife. No explanation. No apology. Just an invitation. Daniel watched her carefully, waiting for anger. Instead, Ayesha smiled politely. "That's thoughtful." Daniel blinked. "You aren't upset." She looked directly into his eyes. "Should I be?" For the first time in days, Daniel felt slightly uneasy. He had expected tears, questions, an argument. Instead, she simply folded the invitation and placed it on the table. "I'll attend." Daniel almost dropped his coffee cup. "You'll what?" "I'll attend the wedding." He searched her face for sarcasm. There was none. "Are you sure?" "Of course. I wish both of you happiness." Her voice was so calm that even Daniel began questioning whether she truly knew anything. He smiled with relief. Perhaps she had accepted reality. Perhaps she had finally given up. He couldn't have been more wrong. That evening, Ayesha met Victor once again. She placed the invitation on his desk. "I'm officially invited." Victor adjusted his glasses. "So, it's finally happening." "Yes." He looked at her seriously. "Are you still certain about your plan?" Ayesha nodded. "More than ever." Victor opened a locked drawer and removed a thick leather folder. "I've prepared everything." Inside were original ownership deeds, trust documents, board resolutions, financial authorizations, and one sealed envelope bearing the signature of Ayesha's late father. At the bottom of the folder lay a single document. Victor placed it carefully in front of her. "The final declaration." Ayesha read the title. "What does it do?" Victor answered quietly. "The moment I present this document, Daniel loses every legal right to represent any company connected to your family's trust." She looked up. "Immediately." Victor nodded. "Immediately. And every bank account. Frozen. The properties. Returned to their rightful owner. The businesses. They'll have a new chairperson." Victor smiled. "You." Meanwhile, across town, Sophia Bennett was trying on her wedding dress. Her closest friends admired the elegant white gown. "You look like a princess." Sophia laughed happily. "I've never been this excited," one of her bridesmaids asked. "So, where's Daniel tonight?" "He said he had one last business meeting." Sophia smiled. "He's working so hard for our future." None of them knew that Daniel wasn't attending a business meeting. He was meeting secretly with a private investigator. "I want everything confirmed," Daniel said. The investigator handed him a folder. "We've watched your wife for the past week." Daniel opened it. There were dozens of photographs. Ayesha leaving Victor's office. Ayesha meeting Emily in the park. Ayesha visiting the family trust headquarters. Daniel frowned. Who's the old man? We believe he's retired lawyer Victor Harrison. Daniel's face hardened. What do they discuss? We couldn't hear. But they've met several times. For the first time, genuine concern crossed Daniel's face. He had underestimated Ayesha. Something was happening. Something he couldn't yet understand. Late that night, Daniel entered Ayesha's bedroom. She was reading quietly. I need to ask you something. She looked up. Of course. Have you been meeting Victor Harrison? Ayesha didn't hesitate. Yes. Daniel carefully studied her expression. Why? She closed her book. He handled my father's estate. I wanted to understand a few legal matters. Daniel forced a laugh. After all these years, grief doesn't follow a schedule. Her answer sounded perfectly reasonable. Daniel relaxed slightly. Still, something felt wrong. He couldn't explain it, but for the first time in years, he felt as though he wasn't the one controlling the game. The following morning, Victor received an unexpected visitor. A young woman stepped into his office, elegant, nervous, and carrying a wedding magazine. My name is Sophia Bennett, she said softly. Victor's eyes widened. I need your help. He invited her to sit. She hesitated before speaking. I think someone is lying to me. Victor remained silent. Sophia took a deep breath. Yesterday, I received an anonymous package. She placed several photographs on his desk. Victor's expression changed immediately. The pictures showed Daniel and Ayesha together. Not years ago. Just days earlier. Married. Living in the same house. Smiling in public. Sophia's voice trembled. Please. She looked into Victor's eyes. Tell me the truth. Victor realized that fate had just accelerated Ayesha's plan. The wedding was now only 2 days away, and the first crack in Daniel's perfect world had finally appeared. The truth finds its way. Victor Harrison looked at the photographs spread across his desk. Each one had been taken within the past week. Daniel and Ayesha leaving the same mansion, sharing breakfast on the terrace, arriving together at a charity event. There was no doubt. Daniel was still living with his wife, while planning another wedding. Victor slowly looked up at Sophia Bennett. Her hands were trembling. Who sent you these? He asked. Sophia shook her head. There was no name. The package was delivered to my apartment this morning. She took a deep breath. I confronted Daniel. Victor remained silent. And he told me the pictures were old. She gave a bitter smile. But one of them showed yesterday's newspaper in the background. Her voice cracked. I know he's lying. Victor folded his hands. There is something you deserve to know. Sophia nodded, bracing herself. Daniel Ramon is still legally married. Sophia closed her eyes. Although she had expected the answer, hearing it spoken aloud shattered the last piece of hope she had been holding on to. Tears rolled down her cheeks. He told me the divorce was finalized. It wasn't. He said Ayesha had moved abroad. She hasn't. He promised me he had nothing to hide. Victor sighed. He has hidden almost everything. For a long moment, Sophia said nothing. Finally, she whispered, was any of it real? Victor answered honestly. I can't tell you what Daniel ever felt. But I can tell you this. Everything he has done has been connected to money. Sophia lowered her head. My grandfather warned me. Victor raised an eyebrow. He told me that people would chase our family's fortune. I thought he was being overprotective. A tear fell onto the photograph, lying in front of her. I was wrong. Across town, Daniel sat inside his luxurious office, completely unaware that the truth had already reached Sophia. He was celebrating. His financial advisor handed him a report. Everything is ready. Daniel smiled. And after the wedding, the Bennett inheritance will begin transferring within weeks. Daniel leaned back in his chair. Excellent. What about your wife? The advisor asked cautiously. Daniel's smile faded. I'll deal with that. The advisor hesitated. What exactly does that mean? Daniel stood and walked toward the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. It means Ayesha has served her purpose. His reflection stared back at him. After this weekend, she'll never stand in my way again. That same evening, Ayesha arrived at Victor's office. She immediately noticed another cup of tea sitting on the table. You had a visitor. Victor nodded. Sophia. Ayesha stopped walking. Sophia Bennett. Yes. What happened? Victor handed her the photographs. Someone sent these anonymously. Ayesha looked surprised. I didn't. I know. She studied the pictures carefully. Someone had been following Daniel. Someone else wanted his lies exposed. But who? She whispered. Victor shook his head. I don't know. He then told her everything Sophia had said. When he finished, Ayesha remained silent for several moments. Finally, she asked, does she know everything? Not yet. Should we tell her? Victor looked thoughtful. If we do, Daniel will realize his plan is collapsing. And he'll run. Ayesha nodded slowly. No. Let him believe he still has a chance. Victor smiled. You're beginning to think exactly like your father. The next morning, Sophia requested a private meeting with Ayesha. Neither woman had ever spoken before. They met in a quiet botanical garden far from the city's attention. Sophia looked nervous. I wasn't sure you'd come. Ayesha smiled gently. You asked politely. For several awkward seconds, neither woman spoke. Then Sophia finally broke the silence. I'm sorry. Ayesha looked confused. For what? For believing his lies. Ayesha's expression softened. You didn't know. I should have. No. You trusted someone you loved. So did I. The two women looked at each other. For the first time, they realized they weren't enemies. They were victims of the same man. Sophia took a deep breath. I've canceled the honeymoon. Ayesha remained quiet. But, Sophia continued, I'm not canceling the wedding. Ayesha looked up. You're not. Sophia's eyes narrowed. No. I want him to believe everything is going according to plan. A slow smile appeared on Ayesha's face. You've already figured it out. Sophia nodded. If he runs now, he'll escape. But if he walks willingly into that wedding hall, he'll trap himself. For the first time since this nightmare had begun, Ayesha laughed softly. Not out of happiness, but out of admiration. Daniel believed he was manipulating two women. He had no idea those two women were now standing on the same side. Victor listened carefully as they explained their new plan. When they finished, he leaned back in his chair. This changes everything. Sophia asked. Is it too risky? Victor smiled. On the contrary, it's brilliant. He opened the leather folder once again. The original plan was for Ayesha to expose Daniel. He looked at both women. But now, you'll expose him together. Late that night, Daniel received a call from Sophia. He answered with his usual confidence. Hello, my love. Sophia forced warmth into her voice. I've been thinking. And I can't wait to marry you. Daniel smiled. So everything's all right. Better than all right. I'll see you at the altar. When the call ended, Daniel felt an overwhelming sense of relief. Whatever suspicion Sophia had experienced was gone. Or so he believed. He poured himself a glass of expensive champagne and stood on the balcony, overlooking the glittering city. 3 more days, he whispered with a satisfied smile. After that, I'll have everything. Miles away, Ayesha stood by the window of her bedroom, looking at the very same city lights. Her phone buzzed. A message from Sophia. Everything is ready. Ayesha replied with only 4 words. See you at the wedding. Neither woman knew that someone else was also watching. From the shadows of a parked black car across the street, an unidentified figure lowered a camera after photographing Ayesha's mansion. Then, without making a sound, the mysterious observer drove away into the night. The game had entered its final stage. The wedding day. The morning of the wedding arrived beneath a sky of brilliant blue. The city buzzed with excitement. Luxury cars lined the streets, leading to the historic Bennett Grand Estate, where one of the year's most anticipated weddings was about to take place. Journalists waited outside the gates, hoping to catch a glimpse of the wealthy guests arriving from around the world. Inside, crystal chandeliers illuminated a ballroom decorated with thousands of white roses and golden candles. Everything looked perfect, exactly as Daniel had imagined. He stood in a private suite, adjusting his black tuxedo in front of a large mirror. His best man smiled. You've won the lottery, my friend. Daniel chuckled. I worked for it. No one in the room knew how true and how sinister that statement really was. Across the estate, Sophia sat quietly in the bridal suite. Her makeup artist admired her reflection. You look breathtaking. Sophia smiled politely, but her thoughts were elsewhere. She remembered every lie Daniel had told her, every promise, every fake expression of love. Then she remembered Ayesha's words from their meeting. Don't let him see your anger. Let him see your confidence. Sophia took a deep breath. I'm ready. She wasn't ready to become Daniel's wife. She was ready to help end his deception. Meanwhile, a black luxury sedan stopped outside the estate. The driver opened the rear door. Ayesha stepped out wearing an elegant emerald green gown. She wore no extravagant jewelry, no dramatic makeup, only quiet confidence. Guests turned to look. Some whispered among themselves. Isn't that Daniel's first wife? I thought they were divorced. What is she doing here? Ayesha ignored every stare. She walked through the entrance with perfect composure, as though she belonged there. Because, in a way no one yet understood, she did. Near the entrance, Victor Harrison was already waiting. He held the same worn leather briefcase he had carried for decades. Inside were the original trust documents, the sealed will, the final declaration. everything required to expose Daniel before hundreds of witnesses. Victor looked at Ayesha. Are you certain? She smiled calmly. I've never been more certain of anything. He nodded. Then today, justice finally arrives. The ceremony began precisely at noon. Soft music echoed through the grand hall as guests took their seats. Daniel stood at the altar, smiling confidently. Sophia slowly walked down the aisle in a stunning white gown. To everyone watching, it was a fairy tale. Only 3 people knew it was actually a courtroom waiting for its first piece of evidence. As Sophia reached the altar, Daniel gently took her hands. You look beautiful, he whispered. She smiled. So do you. Neither smile carried any love. The officiant welcomed everyone. We are gathered here today to unite Daniel Ramon and Sophia Bennett in holy matrimony. The room fell silent. The ceremony moved forward. Then, just before the vows, a calm voice echoed through the hall. Excuse me. Every head turned. Victor Harrison slowly rose from the front row. His expression remained composed. I apologize for the interruption, but before this marriage proceeds, there is a legal matter that must be addressed. Daniel's smile disappeared. What is this? Victor walked toward the altar. I am Victor Harrison, legal trustee of the Ramon family trust. A murmur spread through the audience. Daniel forced a laugh. This isn't the time. Victor stopped only a few feet away. On the contrary, this is the only appropriate time. Daniel's voice grew sharper. Security. 2 guards approached. Before they could reach Victor, another voice interrupted. Let him speak. It was Edward Bennett. Sophia's grandfather slowly stood from the front row. Although weakened by age, his presence commanded immediate respect. If there's a legal issue concerning my granddaughter's marriage, I intend to hear it. The guard stepped back. Daniel's confidence began to crack. Victor opened his leather briefcase. One by one, he removed several official documents. The man standing before you has represented himself as the owner of Ramon Global Holdings. He looked directly at Daniel. That statement is false. Gasps echoed across the ballroom. Daniel laughed nervously. This is ridiculous. I own every share. Victor calmly lifted another document. No, you never did. He handed the file to Edward Bennett. The elderly billionaire adjusted his glasses and carefully examined the paperwork. His expression changed almost immediately. This, he looked at Daniel, is authentic. Daniel's face turned pale. Victor continued. For 7 years, Mr. Daniel Ramon has operated these companies under authority granted through the Ramon family trust. But he has never been their legal owner. Daniel stepped forward angrily. That's impossible. Victor raised a single sheet of paper. The ownership has always belonged to one person. The ballroom became completely silent. Every camera turned toward Victor. Every guest held their breath. Victor slowly looked across the room until his eyes rested on Ayesha. Then he spoke the words that would change everything. The sole owner of Ramon Global Holdings is Mrs. Ayesha Ramon. A wave of shock swept through the hall. Daniel turned slowly toward Ayesha. For the first time since their marriage, he looked genuinely afraid. Ayesha met his eyes without saying a word. Her silence was no longer weakness. It was victory waiting to be completed. The will that changed everything. For several long seconds, no one in the ballroom moved. The silence was so complete that even the soft music had stopped. Every guest stared at Ayesha. The woman they had dismissed as a quiet, forgotten wife was suddenly the center of the room. Daniel felt the ground slipping beneath his feet. This is a lie, he shouted, pointing at Victor Harrison. These documents are forged. Victor didn't react. Instead, he calmly removed another sealed envelope from his briefcase. The seal was made of dark red wax and carried the official crest of the Ramon family. I expected you to say that, Victor replied. This is the original will of the late Mr. Ibrahim Ramon. The room fell silent once again. Even Edward Bennett leaned forward with interest. Victor carefully broke the seal. This document has remained unopened for 7 years, exactly as your father instructed, Mrs. Ramon. Ayesha closed her eyes for a moment. She remembered her father's final words before his passing. One day, the truth will protect you better than I ever could. Victor unfolded the document and began to read aloud. I, Ibrahim Ramon, being of sound mind, declare this to be my final and lawful testament. The guests listened without making a sound. All businesses, investments, properties, and financial assets under the Ramon family trust shall belong exclusively to my daughter, Ayesha Ramon. Daniel's face turned white. Victor continued. Any individual, including a spouse, business partner, or executive, who attempts to gain control of these assets through fraud, deception, or unlawful marriage shall immediately lose every authority granted by this trust. A loud murmur spread across the ballroom. People began whispering. Did he say unlawful marriage? Is Daniel trying to marry while still legally married? This is unbelievable. Daniel suddenly stepped forward. Enough! His voice echoed through the hall. None of this changes anything. I'm the CEO. I run those companies. Victor looked at him calmly. You manage them. You never owned them. Daniel turned toward the audience. Don't listen to this old man. I built everything with my own hands. Before anyone could respond, another voice interrupted. No, it was Ayesha. For the first time that day, she walked toward the altar. Every step was slow, confident, graceful. She stopped only a few feet away from Daniel. Her eyes met his. You built nothing alone. Daniel laughed bitterly. So now you're pretending to be powerful. Ayesha smiled. I'm not pretending anymore. Victor handed her a leather folder. Inside were the original ownership certificates. Without hesitation, Ayesha signed a single page. Victor nodded. Effective immediately. He looked toward several executives, sitting in the front row. Gentlemen, the trust has withdrawn every executive authority previously granted to Mr. Daniel Rahman. One executive checked his phone. A notification appeared. His eyes widened. It has already happened. Another executive looked at his tablet. The board access has changed. The system lists a new chairperson. All eyes turned toward Ayesha. Daniel grabbed one executive by the arm. Tell them it's a mistake. The man slowly stepped back. I'm sorry, Mr. Rahman. The system recognizes only Mrs. Ayesha Rahman. Daniel's phone suddenly rang. He answered immediately. What? His chief financial officer sounded panicked. Sir, every corporate account has been frozen. What? The banks say only Mrs. Rahman has authorization now. Daniel's face drained of color. Before he could respond, another call came in. Then another, and another. His legal advisor, his investment manager, his real estate director. Each call delivered the same devastating news. The office towers, gone. The company jets, gone. The investment portfolios, gone. The luxury properties, gone. Every asset he believed belonged to him had vanished in a matter of minutes. Not because they had been stolen, but because they had never been his. Sophia quietly removed her engagement ring. She looked at Daniel with tears in her eyes. I love the man I thought you were. She placed the ring in his hand. But he never existed. Daniel reached toward her. Sophia, please. She stepped back. No. You didn't want a wife. You wanted my inheritance. Edward Bennett slowly rose to his feet. The elderly billionaire walked toward Daniel with remarkable dignity. I spent 60 years building my family's name. His voice remained calm. And you believed you could steal it with a wedding. Daniel couldn't find the words to answer. Edward turned to his legal team. Cancel every agreement connected to Daniel Rahman. One of the lawyers nodded immediately. It will be done. The ballroom doors suddenly opened. Several officers from the Financial Crimes Investigation Bureau entered the hall. The lead investigator held an official warrant. Mr. Daniel Rahman. Daniel stared in disbelief. You are under investigation for corporate fraud, financial deception, identity misrepresentation, and attempted inheritance fraud. Guests gasped. Cameras flashed nonstop. Journalists rushed toward the entrance. Daniel looked desperately at Ayesha. You planned this. Ayesha shook her head. No. You planned it. You simply forgot one thing. Daniel whispered. What? Ayesha looked him straight in the eyes. You chose the wrong woman to betray. The officers stepped forward. One reached for Daniel's wrist. Just as they were about to place him under arrest, a voice echoed from the back of the ballroom. Wait! Everyone turned. A distinguished elderly woman entered, supported by a cane. Edward Bennett's expression changed instantly. His lips parted in surprise. You! He whispered. I thought you were dead. The entire room froze. The mysterious woman's eyes settled on Daniel. Then she spoke words that stunned everyone. No! I've been alive all along. And I know exactly who helped Daniel begin this entire scheme. The final witness. The ballroom fell into stunned silence. Every eye turned toward the elderly woman standing at the entrance. She wore a simple ivory suit and carried herself with quiet dignity. Though age had slowed her steps, her gaze remained sharp and unwavering. Edward Bennett stared at her in disbelief. Evelyn! His voice trembled. I attended your funeral. The woman smiled sadly. So did everyone else. A wave of whispers swept through the hall. Daniel's face turned ghostly pale. Unlike everyone else, he knew exactly who she was. Evelyn Bennett, Edward Bennett's younger sister. The woman who had disappeared nearly 15 years earlier after a mysterious boating accident. The world had believed she was dead. She wasn't. Evelyn, slowly walked toward the center of the ballroom. I owe everyone an explanation. Edward stepped forward. Where have you been all these years? I was alive, but I was recovering from injuries overseas. She paused. And while I was gone, someone tried to erase me from the family's history. She turned her eyes toward Daniel. I've spent years investigating the people who wanted access to the Bennett fortune. Daniel swallowed hard. His hands trembled. The lead investigator spoke. Mrs. Bennett has been assisting our investigation for the past 18 months. A murmur rippled through the guests. Evelyn nodded. We suspected an organized financial fraud network. We simply didn't know who was leading it. She looked directly at Daniel. Until now. Daniel suddenly laughed. A loud, desperate, almost broken laugh. This proves nothing. You don't have a single piece of evidence against me. Evelyn smiled. I was hoping you'd say that. She nodded toward the ballroom doors. 2 investigators entered carrying several locked evidence cases. They placed them on a nearby table. One officer opened the first case. Inside were laptops, hard drives, mobile phones, signed contracts, bank records. The investigator addressed the crowd. These materials were recovered yesterday from a private storage facility rented under a false identity. He lifted a passport. The fingerprints belonged to Daniel Ramon. Daniel's knees nearly gave way. The investigator connected one of the laptops to a large display screen inside the ballroom. A video began to play. The recording showed Daniel sitting inside his office several months earlier. Across from him sat 2 men and a woman. Daniel's voice echoed through the speakers. First we secure Sophia's inheritance. Then we transfer everything overseas. As for Ayesha, he smiled coldly. She won't be a problem much longer. Gasps filled the hall. Sophia covered her mouth. Edward Bennett closed his eyes. Even the journalists stopped speaking. Daniel shouted, "Turn it off!" No one moved. Another recording appeared. This one showed Daniel forging signatures. A third recording captured him discussing fake divorce papers. Then came financial transfers to offshore accounts, bribery payments, hidden insurance policies. Every lie, every crime, every betrayal, displayed one after another. There was nowhere left to hide. Daniel looked around the ballroom. The guests who had once admired him now looked at him with disgust. Business partners quietly walked away. Friends avoided his eyes. Even his own financial advisor slipped out a side door. Daniel was standing completely alone. The lead investigator stepped forward. Mr. Ramon. He unfolded another document. We now have sufficient evidence to charge you with multiple counts of fraud, forgery, conspiracy, money laundering, attempted inheritance fraud, and attempted financial homicide. Daniel looked toward Ayesha. His voice broke. Please, tell them. You know I loved you. For a long moment, Ayesha simply looked at him. Then she spoke quietly. Love doesn't ask how much someone is worth. It doesn't calculate inheritances. It doesn't plan funerals. A tear rolled down her cheek. I spent 7 years believing your promises. She gently wiped away the tear. But today, I finally believe your actions. Daniel slowly lowered his head. The arrogance that had defined him for years disappeared. For the first time, he looked defeated. The investigators placed him in handcuffs. The sound of the metal locking echoed through the silent ballroom. It marked the end of every illusion he had created. Before the officers escorted him away, Daniel turned one last time. Ayesha. She looked at him calmly. I've lost everything. She nodded. No. You lost everything the day you chose greed over loyalty. Daniel had no answer. The officers led him toward the exit. Camera flashes lit the hallway as journalists rushed to capture the moment. The man who had arrived expecting to become one of the richest men in the country left the wedding as a criminal in handcuffs. The ballroom remained silent long after Daniel disappeared. Finally, Edward Bennett approached Ayesha. He bowed his head respectfully. Mrs. Ramon, today you protected not only your family's legacy, but mine as well. Ayesha smiled gently. I only protected the truth. Edward extended his hand. I hope our families will meet again under happier circumstances. Ayesha shook his hand. I'd like that. As the guests slowly began to leave, Victor Harrison closed his weathered leather briefcase. He looked at Ayesha with pride. Your father would be proud of you. Ayesha glanced toward the ceiling, as if speaking to someone only she could see. I hope so. Victor smiled. There is only one matter left. Ayesha raised an eyebrow. What matter? Victor looked toward the ballroom entrance, where reporters had gathered in large numbers. They all think today's story is over. He smiled knowingly. They have no idea. The biggest surprise is still waiting outside. The woman behind the legacy. Outside the Bennett Grand Estate, hundreds of reporters crowded behind security barriers. Television cameras pointed toward the entrance. News helicopters circled overhead. The story had already become national headlines. Billionaire groom exposed during wedding ceremony. Corporate fraud uncovered at luxury wedding. Bride and first wife unite against business tycoon. Everyone believed the scandal was over. They were wrong. The biggest revelation had not yet been made. Victor Harrison stepped out of the estate with Ayesha by his side. Sophia and Edward Bennett followed a few steps behind. The reporters immediately rushed forward. Mrs. Rahman, did you know about Daniel's crimes? Are you taking control of the companies? What happens to Rahman Global Holdings now? Microphones surrounded Ayesha. Camera flashes illuminated her face. For years she had avoided public attention. Today, there was no reason to hide. Victor raised one hand, asking the crowd for silence. Ladies and gentlemen, I have an official statement. The crowd instantly quieted. Victor opened his leather briefcase one last time. He removed a small velvet box. Inside was an elegant gold seal, the official emblem of the Rahman family trust. This seal, Victor began, has been passed from one generation to the next for over a century. It represents not wealth, but responsibility. He turned toward Ayesha. According to the final wishes of Ibrahim Rahman, he handed her the seal. Today, the leadership of the Rahman family trust officially returns to its rightful guardian. Ayesha accepted it with both hands. For a brief moment, she closed her eyes. She remembered her father teaching her as a child. Real power is measured by the lives you protect, not the fortune you possess. When she opened her eyes again, there were tears in them, but also quiet strength. A reporter called out, Mrs. Rahman, what is your first decision as chairwoman? The crowd fell silent. Everyone expected a dramatic answer. Perhaps revenge. Perhaps mass dismissals. Perhaps lawsuits against everyone who had supported Daniel. Instead, Ayesha smiled. My first decision, she paused, is that no innocent employee will lose their job because of one man's greed. The reporters exchanged surprised looks. She continued, thousands of families depend on these companies. They will not pay the price for Daniel's choices. Another reporter asked, and Daniel's personal fortune? Ayesha answered calmly, he never owned it, so there is nothing for me to take away. Edward Bennett stepped beside her. I've spent decades negotiating with world leaders and billionaires. He looked toward the cameras. But today, I witnessed something far more valuable. He turned to Ayesha. Integrity. The crowd applauded. Sophia approached the microphones next. Her engagement ring was gone. Her wedding bouquet had been left inside the ballroom. I'd like to say something. The reporters nodded. I blamed myself for trusting the wrong person. She glanced toward Ayesha. But this remarkable woman reminded me that being deceived is not the same as being weak. She smiled warmly. Today, I gained something much more important than a husband. A true friend. The two women embraced. The cameras captured the moment. By evening, the image would appear on newspaper front pages around the world. Later that afternoon, Ayesha returned to the Rahman Global Holdings headquarters. The massive glass tower reflected the afternoon sun. Employees gathered quietly in the lobby. Some looked nervous. Others looked ashamed. Many had believed Daniel's version of events. As the elevator doors opened, the entire staff stood. No one spoke. Ayesha walked slowly toward the center of the lobby. I know today has been difficult. She looked around the room. I don't expect your trust overnight, but I promise you this. There will be honesty from this day forward. One by one, the employees began to applaud. Soon the applause filled the entire building. Not because she was wealthy, but because she had earned their respect. That evening, Victor visited Ayesha's office. The large executive chair behind the desk remained empty. Ayesha stood by the window instead, watching the city skyline. You haven't sat down, Victor observed. She smiled. I don't think I've earned that chair yet. Victor chuckled. Your father said the same thing on his first day. He handed her a small wooden box. I almost forgot. What's this? A final gift from your father. She slowly opened it. Inside lay an old pocket watch. Beneath it was a folded note. In her father's familiar handwriting were just 12 words. When truth guides your heart, time will always be on your side. Ayesha smiled through her tears. She carefully placed the watch in her hand. It's beautiful. Victor nodded. He wanted you to receive it only after proving yourself. As night fell over the city, television screens across the country replayed the dramatic events from the wedding. Daniel's arrest, the shocking will, Ayesha's speech, Sophia's embrace. For millions of viewers, it was the story of the year. But inside a quiet prison holding cell, Daniel watched the news alone. The television reflected in his tired eyes. He whispered to himself, I was so close. A voice answered from the neighboring cell. No. Daniel looked up. You were never close. The prisoner smiled faintly. You were standing on someone else's throne. Daniel lowered his head. For the first time in years, he accepted the truth. Everything he had chased had been built on lies. And lies never last forever. A new beginning. 6 months later, the city had changed. So had the people who lived in it. The scandal surrounding Daniel Rahman had become one of the most famous corporate fraud cases in the country's history. Business schools taught it as a lesson in ethics, and newspapers still referred to it as the wedding that changed everything. But for Ayesha, life was no longer about the past. It was about the future. A company rebuilt on trust. Under Ayesha's leadership, Rahman Global Holdings became a very different company. Her first major decision surprised the entire business world. Instead of expanding profits, she invested millions in her employees. She introduced healthcare programs for workers and their families. She created scholarships for the children of employees. She established transparent financial policies so that no executive could ever hide illegal transactions again. Every contract required multiple levels of independent approval. Every financial report became open to the board. Many investors questioned her decisions. Within months, the results answered every doubt. Employee satisfaction reached record levels. The company's reputation recovered. International partners returned. Profits increased naturally, not because of manipulation, but because people finally trusted the company again. For the first time in years, Rahman Global Holdings truly belonged to the people who helped build it. Sophia's new life. Sophia Bennett also chose a different path. Instead of hiding from public attention, she created the Bennett Foundation for Financial Justice, an organization dedicated to helping victims of fraud and financial abuse. She often invited Ayesha to speak at charity events. Whenever journalists asked how they had become such close friends after everything that had happened, Sophia always gave the same answer. Pain introduced us. Truth united us. Their friendship became a symbol of resilience rather than rivalry. Daniel faces justice. Meanwhile, Daniel's trial finally came to an end. The courtroom was filled with journalists, lawyers, and business leaders. The evidence presented by the Financial Crimes Investigation Bureau was overwhelming. Forged contracts, money laundering, insurance fraud, corporate deception, attempted inheritance fraud. Every charge was supported by documents, recordings, and witness testimony. The judge looked directly at Daniel before delivering the verdict. Greed blinded you. Deception empowered you. But the truth has defeated you. Daniel was found guilty on multiple counts. He received a lengthy prison sentence, heavy financial penalties, and a lifetime ban from serving as a director or executive of any corporation. As officers escorted him from the courtroom, he glanced back one last time. Ayesha was there. She didn't smile. She didn't celebrate. She simply nodded. Not in triumph, but in closure. Daniel understood. She no longer hated him. She had simply moved beyond him. A final visit. One quiet autumn afternoon, Ayesha visited her father's grave. She carried a bouquet of white lilies. Victor Harrison accompanied her, standing a respectful distance away. Ayesha knelt and gently placed the flowers beside the headstone. For several moments, she said nothing. The breeze moved softly through the trees. Finally, she spoke. I thought protecting your legacy meant protecting your wealth. She smiled through tears. But now I understand. It was never about the money. It was about protecting your values. She rested her hand on the cold stone. I hope I made you proud. Victor quietly stepped forward. I know he would have been. 1 year later, exactly 1 year after the wedding that never happened, Rahman Global Holdings hosted its annual leadership conference. Employees from around the world gathered in the company's headquarters. Ayesha walked onto the stage to a standing ovation. She looked across the audience. Some faces were familiar. Others were new. But every person in the room shared one thing. Hope. Ayesha smiled before beginning her speech. A year ago, I believed losing everything would destroy me. She paused. Instead, I discovered that what I lost was an illusion. The people who truly belong in your life never ask what they can take from you. They ask how they can help you become better. The audience applauded. She continued. Power without integrity is temporary. Wealth without honesty is fragile. But character, she smiled, is a fortune that no one can steal. The applause grew even louder. The last letter. After the conference, Victor approached her with a familiar leather envelope. I almost forgot. Ayesha laughed. Another letter. Victor nodded. The last one. She carefully opened it. Inside was a single handwritten page from her father. It read, My dearest Ayesha, if you are reading this, then you have already faced your greatest test. Remember this. Betrayal may break your heart, but it should never break your character. Wealth can disappear. Titles can be taken away. Even the people you love may leave. But if you remain honest when dishonesty seems easier, you will always be richer than those who betrayed you. Live with kindness. Lead with courage. Forgive when you are ready. And never allow another person's greed to define your future. I have always believed in you. Your loving father. A tear rolled down Ayesha's cheek. She folded the letter carefully and placed it inside her handbag. Not as a reminder of her pain, but as a reminder of her strength. Epilogue. As the sun set over the city, Ayesha stood by the window of her office. The same skyline she had once looked at in fear now represented endless possibility. Her phone buzzed. It was a message from Sophia. Dinner tonight? No business talk this time. Ayesha smiled and replied, only if you're buying dessert. A second later came the answer. Deal. Ayesha laughed softly, picked up her father's pocket watch, and slipped it into her pocket before leaving the office. She didn't look back. She no longer needed to. Because the woman everyone had once mistaken for weak had discovered the greatest truth of all. Silence is not always surrender. Sometimes, it is the calm before justice speaks. The end.